been a protest for justice anywhere in the United States where you don't see the Puerto Rican flag. We stand for justice all of our lives. Whether it's Black Lives Matter, the Muslim ban, we stand for justice. And so I want to see people give us back the love that we give them. Because we deserve that. In this moment, this should be a horror. This should be a horror to the world. That over 5,000 people are dead, and nobody knew that people were burying their loved ones in their backyard. And this is not a horror. This doesn't affect deeply in the heart, in the soul of any human being. I want to see support.
Hey, Young Turks, I'm Nomi Konst. We're standing here in front of the United Nations in New York City, where a group of activists have congregated in protest, in response to share their message against the U.S. government and against the Puerto Rican government for the failure to disclose and actually investigate the accurate number of deaths that occurred in Puerto Rico because of Hurricane Maria.
If it were 5,000 kittens, there would be outrage. If it was 5,000 dogs, there would be outrage. If it was 5,000 blonde-haired, blue-eyed women, there would be outrage. But when we're talking about people of color, whether it is in Katrina, in the New Orleans, whether it's here in New York City, or whether it's Puerto Rico, the lives of our people do not matter.
When my aunt still does not have electricity and cannot take her insulin, I feel the nails of the cross in my body. When we walk the streets of so many places in Puerto Rico doing relief work and there is no light, there's leaking roofs, there is no food, I feel the nails of the cross in my body.
We should not allow our government to lie to us and tell us that 64 people died in Puerto Rico when it was well over 5,000. One person is way too much to die, but over 5,000 is an absolute outrage.
What we witnessed in Puerto Rico is a public crucifixion of our people.
What is it about us that has us so connected to the master that we would rather continue being battered wives than stand up to and say, either you marry me or it's over, Casanova?
Harvard came out with a study this week saying that at least 4,465 Puerto Ricans had died after Hurricane Maria. Now, it's likely that this number is probably double, if not more, if you factor in the number of people who left the island and came to the States and died in the care in the States because they needed medical treatment. Now, if you recall, we've done quite a bit of reporting on this, but if you recall, there were hospitals that had been shut down, they were running out of equipment, they didn't have water, they didn't have power. There were communities that could not get aid because their roads had been shut down or blocked or flooded or completely in disrepair. Bridges had collapsed. There were communities that were abandoned. People couldn't get medicine. And of course, the most vulnerable members of the population are the first to feel the effect of the tragedy.
My father was hospitalized 2 days after the hurricane. The first hospital had no more oxygen, lost its oxygen supply. He was transferred to a second hospital. The second day I went to visit him, he was not the same. He wasn't reading the daily news. He wasn't listening to music. There was respiratory issues that occurred. Water in the lungs. Finally, 3 days later, I was able to find a doctor to explain what was happening. And that same day, I got the phone call that he passed.
10,000 people died in the last 8 to 9 months. And that could even be a conservative estimate because it doesn't include the people who were forced to leave the island to seek medical attention, which we know is the majority, particularly elders, right? The families that we're attending to here, we don't know how many of them lost their loved ones. In that study, I want to point out, in addition to other independent investigative journalist reports that came out, were done without any collaboration and information provided by the Puerto Rican government, right? Their official estimate continues to be 64. That is gross government negligence. It is criminal negligence.
You talked about the Fiscal Control Board in Promesa. Can you explain the status of that, what's happening in the next few weeks?
Sure, this was a control board that was created by a federal law called Promesa. that includes 7 members of primarily bankers and financial executives that have the ability to decide public policy and financial policy for an entire nation, that can veto the decisions of an elected government, and we've seen them do that are implementing a fiscal plan that includes extremely deep austerity and cuts to essential public services, including healthcare and education and public assistance. And they continue to meet on Wall Street, not in Puerto Rico. They meet just a few blocks down south on Wall Street, where their institutions come from and where they have explicitly said that they are interested in ensuring that those bankers get priority in repayment over the funding of essential public services for people on the island. And this was even before the hurricane.
As we all know, Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States. It's a commonwealth, but it is a colony. It is a colony that has fought for its independence in the past, and many of the activists here in the diaspora have called for the independence of Puerto Rico, and that is what this black flag represents. It is it's the resistance flag of Puerto Rico. The resistance in Puerto Rico is a little bit different. It's a different brand of resistance on the island. The island's politics are much more complicated. It's not Democrats versus Republicans. There are several parties. And the parties reflect different aspects of colonization and how the island should stand in the face of colonization. But many of the more conservative elements on the island, including the Governor Ricardo Rosselló, he calls himself a Democrat when he comes to the mainland. You know, Governor Cuomo from New York comes down to Puerto Rico and meets with Rosselló. You have Tom Perez, the chairman of the Democratic Party, who arguably would probably not be elected chair if it weren't for more conservative elements, more conservative DNC members who believe in statehood, which is actually on the island a more conservative issue, so a supported issue. So, you know, the Democrats in the states find themselves in a relationship with the more conservative leaders on the island. You know, these are the same leaders who have cut the budget of Puerto Rico. They believe in the Fiscal Control Board. They have called for and voted for closing down the majority of public schools. They have supported the doubling of, more than doubling, of tuition for the University of Puerto Rico. Now, this is in the States. This is an American colony that is supposed to be supported by the mainland, and of course it is not. And not only that, there's frankly a cover-up of the number of deaths. This is out there, it's obvious, everybody on the island and in the diaspora knows somebody who has died, and now it took a Harvard study to prove this. So we are here in solidarity, we're here to report on this community that is not receiving adequate reporting, that is not receiving any support, at all from the U.S. government, and is really being sold out by its own representation on the island. I'm Nomi Konst. We're here in front of the United Nations. Thank you.
Did you know that there are families that exist here that have no shelter here in New York City, that were displaced, that are being ignored by the city government, that don't have food to eat in hotels and in shelters here in New York City?
This geolocation is important, not because it's the heart of Manhattan, but because it's the heart of the United Nations. And it's our job as activists, Puerto Rican and otherwise, doing work around Puerto Rico to demand 4 things. Cancel and audit the debt. That we want a just recovery policy for Puerto Rico. We want to repeal the Promesa Act and therefore disband the junta. And we want decolonization now.
Sisters and brothers, I am in perpetual outrage at the atrocities being committed against the people of Puerto Rico way before there was a Hurricane Maria. This is a long-standing struggle for the people of Puerto Rico, and I am here today to show the Puerto Rican people the same solidarity that they have shown my people for decades. We are not doing the people of Puerto Rico any favors by coming to stand here or raising our voices. It is our goddamn responsibility to stand up for the